Hello everybody. Welcome to Organizational Psychology. We're going to talk about Lesson 6. Here we explore values, attitudes, ability, job satisfaction. It's tied to the next homework assignment, and I'm going to flesh out how to do that homework assignment. In part, at least I'm going to give you some more tools to do that homework assignment in Lesson 6.1, which is brand new for this semester. So let's get busy. Let's talk about values. And you know from previous assignments that I'm pretty much a stickler on values. We've already done an assignment that explored values and mission statements, etc. So now we're going to kind of expand on that and notice that we can get all the way to job satisfaction, which is attitudes. So we got all these components all together here. So what do you think? Snapdragons? I got to grow snapdragons again. These are from 2-3 years ago. But so let's talk about values. Two types of values. Instrumental values are personally endorsed means to a desired end, such as honesty, ambitiousness, independence, obedience. When we think instrumental values, it's how we do life. How is the big word there. How do we get it done? Do we behave honestly? Do we behave with loyalty? Do we demonstrate ambition? Are we opportunists? Notice, these are how we get things done. Terminal values, then, the second type of value, is the desired end state, such as salvation. So I might go to church, right? I might demonstrate a huge amount of religiosity, right? And that's the how. I live piously so that I can achieve salvation at the end of my life, so to speak. So there's a how, and then there's a what or a why for, so to speak. So accomplishment. I persist. I work hard, right? My accomplishment was to earn my PhD, my doctorate. That was a terminal value. That is education. To become educated is the terminal value. But what is required? A lot of hard work, sweat, toil, persistence. So persistence could be an instrumental value. I'm going to keep plugging away until I achieve my desired end state, that is my degree. So other terminal values might be happiness, security, wealth, right? And there's myriad values. These are just a short smattering of them. Now, when we pursue values, we pursue our values in a context. So it might be within a relationship. It might be in a place of business. It might be in life in general. And we find then that there can be three types of value conflict. So intrapersonal, that is a conflict of internal priorities. So note that I had a value conflict when I quit my job at Boise Cascade. I was set up to become the tech rep. They had just assigned a new job to me. They created this new job so that I was this, what was I? I was the quality control technician specialist or whatever the hell it was, which set me up to become the tech rep. And it came with a big raise, so they raised me to $65,000 a year, right? And as tech rep, I don't even know what I was going to make, you know, probably $150K a year down the road, 2-3 years down the road. But I wanted to go to school. And I really wanted to go to school, and I couldn't go to school. So I quit my job so I could go to school full time, right? And that was an interpersonal value conflict. What were my priorities at that point in time? And I had to make that decision, and I considered it, this versus that, right? Now, interpersonal is conflict between individuals. So let's say when I decided to go to graduate school, to move here to Ohio, you know, I sat down with my wife, right? I sat down with Rebecca and said, you know, I want to go to graduate school. And she says, that's good. Where do you want to go? And I said, well, there's a bunch of schools in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And she says, what about California? I said, I think it's going to be hard to get in. And what do you think? Are we ready for a change? And she went along with it. So one of her big values was flexibility. That is, I can live just about anywhere. I'm willing to check this out. And that was consistent with my value. But what if she valued security and stability? No, let's stay in our condo because we own this condo. Let's stay in our condo and stay in Southern California, right? And then I'd be, no, I need to move. I need to go elsewhere, right? Then that would be an interpersonal value conflict between two people. And then one of the reasons we did the value exercise at the beginning of the course, I want you guys to work with companies that have values that are consistent with your values. Or if you take personnel psychology, I want you to think in terms of hiring people who have values that are consistent with the organization's values. That is to avoid, right, value incongruence between worker and company. So, what can we do? Well, if we have value conflict, then we need to discuss our values, either intrapersonal, then we have to have the discussion with ourselves, or interpersonal between two people, or organizationally, and often this would be a discussion you have with your manager or your supervisor, and that is you clarify the values. What do you really value? And is there common ground? Can we find some compromise? And if not, then we have to consider whether the values are important enough for us to change it up, so to speak. So values of a value model of work-family conflict, and there's many models that we could adopt, but it gives you an idea that general life values feed to family values. That's where our family values are usually derived from our general life values, as are our work values. And then notice that family values often lead to value similarity within, and work values value congruence. But what we can then have is work-family conflict, and we know that's a very common idea, right, that may facilitate or may interfere with value attainment. And to the extent that we're stymied in attaining our terminal values, right, notice these are largely instrumental values here, right, and then this is where we get the terminal values, job and life satisfaction. If we're disappointed, then in fact we may demonstrate reduced satisfaction with our life and or with our job. For me at Boise Cascade, it was kind of present in both respects. More so with life value mismatch. I really wanted to pursue my education. And so, work-family balance observations. Work-family balance begins at home. Where else? Employers' family supportive philosophy is more important than specific programs. So overall, what is their philosophy? And that would represent their instrumental values, right, rather than the programs they operate, which would demonstrate more terminal values, if you will. Informal flexibility in work hours and working from home can be a boon, can really help us survive. You know, I have to compliment Ohio State. I have to compliment the psychology department, because they're saying, look, we're under this quarantine. We got these issues, COVID, and now look at COVID. The numbers are just going through the roof, right? I need to stay home. Can I still perform my job in a way that is consistent with my instrumental values? Can I still try to do a high quality product, right? And the product then becomes the terminal value. And OSU Psychology has been very flexible in how we do our job. And hopefully it's meeting your needs, right? Mentors can help us reduce conflict through modeling and sharing experiences. That is, mentors can communicate to us, hey, that these value conflicts are normal, and they can explain to us how they negotiated them for themselves as one approach to it. The proactive approach, identify potential conflicts before they occur and then do something about them so that we don't get embedded in that value conflict. And the problem with being one's own boss often then yields value conflicts that we might not anticipate. Being one's own boss is not the solution to everything for every person. For some of us it works quite well, for others maybe not so much. So, let's talk a little bit about attitudes. And here we have snapdragons and petunias. Not a whole lot of petunias, but plenty of snapdragon. Let's talk attitudes. And if you have a chance to take the attitudes class here, the psychology of attitudes at Ohio State, I would, because this is the #1 program for attitudes in the country. OSU's social psychology, always in the top 5. Last year, Ohio State Social Psychology Graduate School was rated #1, and there's a reason for that, because it's the center of attitude research first and foremost. Now, there's a lot of other contributions being made as well, but attitudes. And I remember when I got here in '99, I started in fall of '99 as a graduate student. And the next year, because 2 years of significant coursework for us graduate students in social psychology, I took the attitudes class. Now, it was Attitudes 630 back then. It's got a new number now. But I remember sitting in the back of the class where I like to sit, and I see Rich Petty, Mr. Attitudes himself. I see John Krosnick. Krosnick's now at Stanford doing a whole bunch of attitude stuff there and survey research at Stanford. Rich Petty, of course, still at Ohio State and will be probably forever, and thank God for that. I'm sitting in this class and I'm going, man, this is too cool. Here we are at Ohio State, social psychology, class and attitudes taught by Petty and Krosnick. It doesn't frickin' get any more amazing than this. And then the first day of class, what do? They lay out the definition. What's an attitude? It's an individual's latent evaluative orientation toward an object, favorable or unfavorable, at some degree of intensity. Holy shit. Doesn't sound like much on first listen, but it encapsulates attitudes perfectly. And why wouldn't they, right? So it's a latent evaluative orientation, latent meaning behind the scenes, not always up in our face, but can be brought into consciousness. It's an evaluative orientation, so it's, is this good or bad? Is this positive or negative, right? There's always an attitude object, so an attitude is directed or about an object, and that could be a person, that could be a thing, it could be a movie, it could be a book, it could be Annika, who's sleeping. Do you want to say hello to everyone, Annika? No? You tired? Okay. So, it's toward an object, favorable or unfavorable, and this is a favorable attitude towards Annika, right? At some degree of intensity, and my love for Annika is super big and super intense, right? So there you go, Annika. Right? But at some degree, and this encapsulates, so what do we need to know about attitudes? This is the whole shebang. Now, with that level of complexity, let's go into the workplace and see some of the bullshit they try to foist on us. Attitude is a decision. How many of you have a workplace where they have these stupid ass signs in the break room or whatever? I call them stupid ass signs because it's hokey. It's silly. This is minimizing the importance of attitudes. Attitudes is a decision. No, I think attitudes is more than just a decision, right? Attitudes can be a long process in creation. Or positive attitude. It changes everything. Well, yeah, it might, but that's easier said than done. And how many of you seem to have some issues with pessimism? And people tell you, hey, buck up, look at the bright side. And then that just changes everything, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Right? So these, I think, really kind of minimize the impact and the complexity of attitudes. Hey, maybe here's something that's more to the point. Look, man, so far I've shit my pants, puked on myself, had my temperature taken. It's only 9 a.m. Why don't you coochie this, right? And isn't this the attitude that often we succumb to? So this is not a person who wants to be told, hey, positive attitude changes everything. He's got a different message for us. And as we look at attitudes, we see that attitudes are relatively complex. That is, attitudes have an affective component. That is the feeling component. So this could be warmth or cold. This could be positive or negative, but describes the general sensation, the affective response to an attitude object. Now, the cognitive component is what we know about objects, and so we can know the positive aspects of, let's say, cigarette smoking, which it feels good, it quenches the nicotine desire, etc. The activity itself, I remember sitting around the dining room table with my dad when I was a teenager, and he was a smoker and I was a smoker, and we would sit there and have these philosophical discussions, which always led to these deep draws on the cigarette and exhaling these clouds of smoke, and it's like thought existed within the smoke, etc. And it's a very positive experience. Notice I'm talking a cognitive experience, but it's also combined with the affective, right? Because it creates a fond memory of my father, right? And it's linked to the behavior, which is the connotative. Connotative, not many people use that term anymore. It's a behavioral aspect. And notice that attitudes can also be behavioral, and they direct us to approach or to avoid. Okay. Now, that's what Smith had laid out in 1947, right? And this is post-World War II, and a huge amount of attitude research had come to maturity. Evaluation is the positive negative aspect, and Sarvis in 93, as we started to study non-conscious aspects of the mind once again, as social psychologists, we see that maybe an attitude object has a little link in the brain. So here's an attitude object in the brain. Don't ask me how it's represented, right? But it's got a link, and this link says is my general attitude positive or negative, and gives no more information than that. And if you doubt that, remember that the implicit association test was created to test these implicit attitudes, right? Now, we know that attitude has strength. We saw that in the definition. And when we bring people into the laboratory and we want to test their attitudes, right, strong attitudes will demonstrate greater persistence. That is, strong attitudes last longer. If we try to change attitudes, we get more resistance for strongly held attitudes. Strong attitudes have a tremendous influence on behavior. So if you want to quit smoking, then the question we have to ask is not, do you like smoking? Because of course I like smoking. The thing is, do you like quitting smoking? And as my like for quitting smoking increases, then the likelihood of me successfully quitting smoking goes up. Right? So it's not whether I like smoking or not. What I really need to be queried about, if you want to predict whether I'm going to quit smoking or not, is not, do you like smoking? That's not predictive of whether I'm going to quit or not. So do you like quitting smoking? And it's like, overall, I got to the point in my life after 20, 25 years of smoking cigarettes off and on. I said, yeah, I like quitting smoking because I feel better. I breathe better. I save money. I don't stink. I have a view that my life will last longer. I'm less likely to get cancer. So at some point, I hit that tipping point where I liked my attitude towards quitting smoking was stronger than my attitude to continue smoking. Right? And it influences attitudes. Strong attitudes influence thought or perceptions. And we know, for example, racism is an example of an attitude, right? A negative attitude towards people of another race. Well, it affects perception. We know that racists are more likely to behave poorly towards or attack or find a person guilty in a courtroom setting, whatever, because it affects their perceptions, let's say, of the evidence that they're being presented in the courtroom. So, what are the four possible reactions then to attitude objects? Well, we can have a positive reaction or we can have a negative reaction to an attitude object, but it's not that simple because these can combine. If you ask, what's your attitude towards cigarette smoking, Mark? And I say, well, I like smoking cigarettes. I got a lot of fond memories. I like the activity, doing something with my hands. I like the feeling of the nicotine that it creates in me. Kind of sharpens my perception and my intellect, etc. But I also know that it's expensive. It makes me stink. It increases my probability of getting cancer significantly. It makes me short of breath when I go up the stairs. So when you say, what are your attitudes towards smoking? Well, I have positive reactions, but I have negative reactions as well. Right? And those reactions can be strong or they can be weak. So what we're going to do now is combine valence, positive or negative, in a 2x2 design by 2, that is strength, weak, or strong. And we end up with kind of 4 possible attitude quadrants that we can place ourselves. Now, if you ask me about something I don't know anything about, how do you feel about, I don't even know, so how do you feel about, let's pick some kind of food. How do you feel about South African food? And it's, well, I've never been to South African food, been to South Africa, and I don't even know what South African food is. So note, my positive reaction, my negative reaction are both very weak because I have no knowledge of that attitude object. What we label positive and negative reactions as both being weak is indifference. That is, I don't know. I'm indifferent because I have no information. Now, let's suppose that I have a strong negative attitude towards something. And at this point, smoking, I have developed a strong negative attitude. Right? And this is why I don't smoke. Right? So it's negative and it's strong. Now, positive attitude, since our kind of social distancing. I've been in the house a lot. Haven't been to campus, haven't been able to walk around. Dusted off the Bowflex. bought an exercise bicycle. So he asked me, what is your attitude towards working out? And I said, it makes me feel good, and hopefully I'm losing some of the weight I gained doing nothing, and sitting at home. So I have a positive attitude, and what that means is you will see me. Well, you won't see me because I don't bring the camera down there, but I will be on the bicycle, or I will be doing the Bowflex thing 6 days a week, because I have a strong positive attitude towards it, and no negative attitude. So, oh, well, it hurts. No, just do it. Now, let's suppose, though, when I was a smoker, but realized the dangers of smoking, but I love smoking, right? It's like I got strong positive reaction to smoking. Smoking's frickin' bitchin', right? Woo. But a strong negative reaction to smoking, and this is when you have what's called dual attitudes, and this is, English misuses this language, this word a little bit. Ambivalence. Ambivalence many people take to mean indifference. It doesn't actually. Ambivalence means I have both strong positive and negative attitudes in conflict, if you will. Okay. Now, attitude-behavior connection. Attitudes can be poor predictors of behavior, and attitude researchers found this for a good long time. They would measure people's attitudes, and then they would measure the behavior, and the attitude just didn't seem to match the behavior. And when trying to predict behavior, ask specifically about the attitude towards the behavior. So in questionnaire design, if you're ever doing surveys in your workplace or wherever else, make the question as specific as possible. Don't ask me my attitude about smoking, because my old statement about smoking then would be dual attitude ambivalence. I love it and I hate it, right? But what you really want to know is not what my attitude towards smoking is. I don't think anyone cares about that. What people wanted to know is, how do you feel about quitting smoking? So make the question more specific. How do you feel about quitting smoking? All right? So AIZEN'S theory of planned behavior then really separates the behavior from the attitude with this intermediate construct called intention. So we can assess the attitude towards the behavior, we can assess the subjective norm and the perceived behavioral control. And let's use the smoking example again. So as my attitude towards quitting smoking improves, right, as the subjective norm, as smoking becomes less and less popular and acceptable in society, right, and I'm coached on the techniques of quitting smoking, so I believe that I'm capable of quitting smoking, you combine those, that increases my intent to quit smoking. And at some point, tipping point, then my intention becomes strong enough that I demonstrate the quitting smoking behavior. Okay? So note that it's intention that is the predictor behavior, not the attitudes that feed to intention. Now, yes, as these get stronger, then we would hope that the intention gets stronger, and eventually we see that difference. Okay? So, job satisfaction then, what is it? Well, it is how one feels about their job or some aspect of that job. And so job satisfaction is an attitude, but notice, it's a complex attitude. It's also correlated with organizational commitment. To what extent am I committed to the organization? Okay? And I like my job with the psychology department. I love you guys. I don't get to see you now, but I love you guys, and I love what I do, and I love doing it for the psychology department at Ohio State, so I'm strongly committed to the organization. My positive attitude towards what I do and the organization enhances, increases, feeds into my commitment, and also my preoccupation with it, my job involvement, right? So a lot of people, you know, who want to read novels that kind of take them away. What am I reading right now? I'm reading Tillich's Courage to Be. I'm reading Eric Fromm's Escape from Freedom. I just finished The Existential Cafe. Everything I'm reading, right? I'm reading Seneca and I'm reading Marcus Aurelius for Psychology of Emotion next semester. So my spare time when I read, I'm not reading novels or fun stuff. it is fun to me, but I'm so involved in my job, I'm reading stuff that will hopefully make me more facile in the classroom with these concepts. So let's call it good. Oh, and if you're part of the Psychology Book Club, I'm going to lead the first session of Psychology Book Club going into spring, and we're doing Erich Fromm's Escape from Freedom. I can't think of a more important book in this day and age right now. Obviously there are. But let's call it good for part one. We'll move on to part